and thank you for coming this evening. My name is Peter Eberhardt, and like Dave Imus, I'm a graduate of the University of Oregon Geography Department. Dave and I both count as our mentor, the late, great Professor Bill Loy. And how many of you own a copy of the Atlas of Oregon? Okay, great. So, well represented. Bill Loy was a dear friend of ours and our mentor, and just really gave us our lives and our careers. I wanted to say three things to you this evening about Dave that really impressed me. First is that Dave is meticulous in his research and design of maps. One example of this is in his 1990 base map of Eugene, Springfield that he designed. He drove every single street, or bicycled, walked, or drove every single street in Eugene, Springfield, and updated or corrected the Oregon Department of Transportation base, finding over 500 errors on the state's base map. He went on to make that map. It was a bestseller for about a decade or so, and just did a fabulous job on it. So that's one example. Number two, Dave is a master at combining the many elements and layers on a map, so creating a visual hierarchy that is clearly established and really helps you as a map reader see what's important up close and other information that's further back in the map, but still visible. On the U.S. map that's visible over here on the right, Dave created and balanced 260 layers in Adobe Illustrator that went into printing this. So if you have any idea, each layer is a distinct layer that has a color, it has a type size, or a line weight, or a shading percentage. And this is just a fabulous example of, 260 layers went into printing that map. A third example is that Dave has consistently won awards at the national level. There's a national map contest that takes place every year. Cartographers enter this contest, and a jury of peers looks and chooses among them. This map over here in the United States represents Dave's 10th national award, his first place award, and in 2011, when this was acknowledged, it won the best of show for that area, for the whole contest. So. This evening, Dave has a great presentation lined up for you. Lots of slides, lots of great information. Thank you again for coming tonight. Dave, I turn it over to you, and let's hear what you have to say.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Pedro. I call him Pedro because for many years I thought he was born in Cuba. But it turned out to be Washington, D.C. Is that correct, Pedro?
That's correct.
Yes. And I was born actually in Coos-Bay. Yes. But I lived most of my life here. Virtually all of it. And thanks for joining me for a cup of coffee. Yeah, so my name's Dave Imus, and I'm a native Oregonian. Graduated from Churchill High School, after going to Adams Elementary School and Jefferson, and then I went to Lane Community College, where I didn't exactly know what I wanted to study, but I took psychology and accounting, and neither one of those things interested in me other than just very superficially. And then I took a geography of Oregon class from Ryan Anderson, and it remains perhaps the best geography course or any college course that I've ever taken. And I discovered in that course that I was a geographer, and in fact, as a 19-year-old or whatever I was, I could have taught the course because I'd been every place in Oregon virtually, and I guess I paid attention. Then transferred over to the University of Oregon and graduated with a degree and a Bachelor of Arts in Geography and Spanish, and went on to pursue map making, and I haven't really done much with Spanish other than have like email correspondence with people in Latin America, which is kind of a cool thing. Let me get collected here. If I had a job, I would have called in sick today because I have the cold that everybody has, and so I'm not going to get too close to anybody. We're not going to sell any maps at the end of the night or anything like that. Just doesn't seem fair to expose other people to this crud. So if I say some things that don't make sense, it's probably because my brain is sort of on fire, but I'll do the best I can. So I graduated from the University of Oregon with this degree in geography, but I didn't have enough experience in the field of cartography, nor did I have the proper education. I had a degree in geography and not cartography to get a job as a cartographer, like for the Forest Service or something like that. And I was pretty devastated to learn that. And I should also add that as I was graduating from college, I did a couple of 6-month internships, one for the Forest Service as a cartography technician, and one for the BLM as a forestry technician. And because I'd studied biogeography a lot in school and thought that might be what I pursued, but I found out that being a forestry technician means working out in the rain and walking up and down muddy hills, and while things are falling out of the trees and the nasty weather. And I learned that cartographers work in downtown offices with coffee places across the street. I think I could do that. So, but I didn't have enough experience, so I started my own business. And what's our next slide here? I started my own business, and I've had a chance to learn a great deal about map making since I started my own company, Imus Geographics, back in 1983. And this first slide that I'm showing you is not my work, but the title of my presentation today, Classical Cartography, the Missing Genre, is about this kind of map. This is a detail from my very favorite all-time map. It was made by the Swiss Topographic Office, and you can see some famous geography there, the Matterhorn and Zermatt. This is a map that's made for the sole purpose of just making Switzerland understandable to the Swiss and whoever else is looking at this map. And I'll be talking about this type of map continuously through my presentation, and I hope that by the end of the presentation we'll have an even greater appreciation for this map. So I've had a chance to make a lot of really cool stuff over the years. This is one of my most recent maps, the Missoula floods. How many people have heard of the Missoula floods? Yeah, and that's awesome. We obviously have geographers here. I asked that question at a Rotary Club meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I got a few hands, but it's really cool that a lot of people know geography in this group. This is a detail from the map of the Wallowa Mountains that I made in the 90s, all made by hand. It was a great map to make. Probably a lot of people in this room there's one person raising his hand already. Anybody else ever have this map? Yeah. It was fairly popular. It was only in print really for a few years, but for, I don't know, another 10 years after it was out of print, I'd get a phone call at least once a month. Somebody wanted to know where they could get another copy of it. And the 911 center used this map until it was grossly out of date, just because, I researched it very carefully. Every type label is placed where it will do the most good, and so they found it very easy to use, even though it had become out of date. Now a little zoom out. This is from my first map of Oregon, made in 1998 or something like that. The next slide will show you that I've mapped Eugene, Springfield in 3 different scales, and this is from my U.S. map. And this, of course, is a detail from the essential geography of the United States of America, the map that you see over here, and then a little bit of Missouri, or most of Missouri. So I've made a lot of cool maps, but I had to start someplace, and this is where I started. This was my first professionally prepared map. It's a map of Roseburg, Oregon. This is downtown. I mean, this is just a part of it. And it was made with the tools that I had learned to use in cartography courses with Bill Lloyd, using pen and ink, techniques that had been around since the 1920s is what I learned on. And I used a lettering template, one of these, that if there's any old engineers in here, they've probably used them. And a few years ago, I was on I went into the Brownsville Historical Museum, and they had an exhibit of historic drafting tools that included one of these templates and all the other tools. I knew how to use all the tools in their historic drafting tool. My first experience with feeling old. So within a couple of years, my techniques had advanced. I was making maps under contract for Rand McNally, and this is part of a map probably of Beaverton that I made. My techniques had improved, my tools were more sophisticated. I was using tools that were more current with the times. This is a detail from my Willamette Pass ski trail map. This was my first map that won any sort of national award. When I was notified that I'd won an award, I thought, well, there's got to be some sort of mistake. You know, I'm just this cartographer out in Oregon. I'm working. I probably made this map at home, you know, and I wasn't using the most sophisticated tools at the time that this one was made, and it caused me to do a survey of American cartography just to see what was out there, and it was my first indication that there was maybe something wrong with the way cartography was done in the United States, that it was possible to make maps that were better than we were making them in the United States. I also made a map of the Santiam Pass ski trail map, the ski trails that right after that one. My Eugene map that we looked at a while ago, and a map of Diamond Peak Wilderness in which I used aerial photography under the shaded relief and all the trails and contours and everything. I thought I had really invented something cool, but it just never really caught on. But an interesting story about this is in the production of the map, we discovered that there were 2 clear cuts inside the boundary of the Diamond Peak Wilderness area. And don't know which came first, the clear cuts or the boundary. I suspect the clear cuts predated this boundary extension or something along those lines. The Wallowa Mountains map, this was my first map that won top national honors. And I decided to make this map when I was standing on top of Eagle Cap, right in the center of the slide. And this is the map that I had in my hand when I was standing on top of Eagle Cap. I couldn't make heads or tails out of what I was seeing around me. You know, the contours were too close together, and the index contour numbers were so tiny that they could not be read. There was no indication of where it was forested and where it wasn't. This dark green is land ownership. You know, the way it was treated on this map was like it's a land ownership map being sold to people to use as a backcountry guide. And I thought, well, I think I can do better than that. So I collected all these Swiss quadrangles that I'd become familiar with in college and studied what the Swiss did and learned that I could do just about everything that the Swiss did. They did really cool rock illustrations that I have always avoided because, you know, I'm not really an illustrator, and I thought it would take a lot of time to learn how to do those rock illustrations. But I studied their contour intervals and how they place type and their levels of generalization and things like that to make my map of the Wallowa Mountains. Now, it's been said that looking at my maps, like the United States map, is like being nearsighted all your life, or having an astigmatism, something like that, and then putting on glasses for the first time and seeing the world for the way it really is. And I think that this is a good example of why that is true. This is a standard American-made map that was accepted at the time as reasonable cartography. And now here's what happens when you put your glasses on and see how expressive a map can be. That's the same area.
Oh, wow. Big difference.
You know, and this, and, you know, we're going to be talking about geographic literacy in this presentation, and this is the type of map that today is really the level of expression of cartography in the United States from which we are expected to become geographically literate. And I think it's virtually impossible to become geographically literate from a map on which you can't see the geography. So maps like this are much more, it's much more practical to become geographically literate from a map like this. And this was my first consciously geographic map. You know, I went well beyond the Wallowa Mountains in my depiction of culture and landforms on this map. And, you know, and I had elevations of towns and things like that. Made a map of the Metolius River, and here's a detail from it. The Library of Congress a number of years back had an exhibit. What was it called? Maps in Our Lives? Maps in Our Lives. And they chose 40 American-made maps for the exhibit, and they chose my Metolius map for the exhibit, and they used my Metolius map image for their poster and for their brochure. And I was back in Washington, because that's where I get all my maps printed at the time of the exhibit. And I went to see it, and as I was walking out of the Library of Congress, they had this kiosk outside, and here was my map, you know, in a Library of Congress kiosk with the Capitol dome right behind it. And I was thinking, wow, I'm a participant. I'm doing something here. Map of Oregon, my last handmade map. Published, I think this was published in '98. I lose track of time. But my last handmade map, and this also won top national honors. The shaded relief for it alone took like 600 hours, and I never got tired of anything that I ever did as far as making a map, except for creating the shaded relief for that Oregon map. And by the time I got down like to the Trout Creek Mountains, east of Steens Mountains, because I started up in the around Astoria and shaded across the state. 600 hours later, I finally am down in Nevada, and I'm ready to be done with that shaded relief. But here's a Lane County windowed out of that map. I loved manual cartography, and I learned a lot about it and applied myself very seriously to doing a good job about it. And I was reluctant to give it up. You know, other cartographers, by the time I made that Oregon map, they were all making maps digitally. But I didn't think computers were powerful enough at the time, and I didn't want to make the transition. But by and by, they quit making the materials that I used to make maps, and so I stopped making maps myself. And I met up with a cartographer in Massachusetts, Pat Dunleavy, who was already up to speed on all that stuff. So he and I started collaborating with a map of the Bull of the Woods and Opal Creek wilderness areas, which I do not have a slide of, because neither Pat or I are very proud of that map, and we sort of keep it hidden. But our next map was this Chugach State Park map, and we designed it after the Wallowa Mountains map that I'd made a few years earlier. This map also won Best of Show in the National Map Design Competition. Here's a detail of it. I mean, here, you know, we've got Spencer Butte, Mount Pisgah, and that's awesome. They're cool. But this is what the landforms right outside of Anchorage look like. Big glacier valleys, and there's glaciers in these mountains, and it's really cool. I decided to make this map when I was on Crow Pass, and I learned about this Chugach State Park, 500,000 acre alpine wilderness park on the edge of a city that's got 250,000 people. And you know, I'm an artist, but I'm also practical, and I thought, hey, those numbers sort of add up. I think I'll make a map. And I made a map, and this is it, and it's just now going out of print. And the reason it's going out of print is National Geographic made a Chugach State Park map. I hardly sold any of these maps over the summer, and so we're just gonna have to let her go.
Is that digital?
Yes, that's all. This is all digital, you know. So you can see the shading and stuff. It's got a nice touch to it, and it's digital, but it wasn't made just by a machine pressing a few buttons. Pat Dunleavy actually redrafted all these contours using photogrammetric techniques that only Pat could pull off. And so it's made properly. These contours are generalized correctly, etc., so that it has a very handmade look. So the Chugach State Park map was successful, and I'd established a nice distribution network up there around Anchorage and stuff, the Chugach State Park map, and so I decided to make a map of the whole state of Alaska. I mean, how's that for artistic inspiration? Oh, and here's a detail from that map, Wrangell Mountains. Pat and I are both really serious cartographers, but we do things differently. And with the Alaska map, he and I were still arguing. He lives in Williamstown, Massachusetts, and I went back there for 2 or 3 weeks to finish up the map with him. And these are, of course, all digital files, and they get sent to the printer over the internet, you know. And minutes before we sent the files off to Williams and Hindstown in Washington area that I was telling you about, Pat and I were still arguing about what type of map we had made. You know, Pat thought we'd made a landform map. I thought we'd made a travel map, and I thought it needed to be a travel map because that's what people pay for. They're paying to see all those roads and place names and things like that, and not the landforms. So we lightened up the landforms so you could see all those roads and all those type labels better. So I guess I won that battle. And the next map, the Sierra Nevada map, we were arguing tooth and nail again about what kind of maps we should make. So we decided that from that point forward, each project that we collaborated on would be either his project or my project. Because artists, you know, we put our hearts and our souls into these things, and we want them to be the way we envision them, and not maybe somebody else. Even though we have respect for their work, we want it to be done our way. So we decided that we'd do it that way, and it worked out great. You know, I made a map, or he designed a map of Berkshire County, Massachusetts, that I basically made to his design, and no fights, and it worked out fine. So we were in the middle of making the Sierra Nevada map when we decided that. And here's a detail, the Yosemite area. This map was more of a return to artistic cartography. And I've learned how to use Photoshop in the last year or two. And this is something you can do in Photoshop, make these perspectives. So you'll see a few of these throughout the presentation, just because I like to do them. So the Oregon map that I had made in the 90s needed to be updated. And I couldn't get the materials. I'm not sure I would have wanted to get back into manual cartography anyway. And so I made a map of the state of Oregon using a computer all by myself. So Pat, you know, he does the technical stuff. He goes through the internet and all this stuff, and he grabs data, and he knows how to put it all together into graphic arts programs that I can deal with. You know, most map making in the United States is a technical challenge. It's the measurement of the earth and the collection of data and the representation of that data. And to me, that's a good place to start with data and then turn it into information. Here's the same area that we saw from the manual map and a comparison of the two. I am sort of torn about which one I like the best. There's advantages and disadvantages of both styles of creating shaded relief and maps and things like that. But the impression of 3 dimensions is better, I believe, on this one than on this one. So tonight, I'm going with manual is better. Tomorrow will probably be back to digital is better, but for tonight, that's it. Hey, something I want to point out before I forget is that I've discovered that if a person is looking at a shaded relief map that is done properly, with just one eye open, it creates an impression of 3 dimensions that you don't get looking at it with 2 eyes. You know, with 2 eyes, your eye just sees a flat piece of paper with some image on it, and if you really concentrate, you can see it in 3 dimensions. However, with one eye closed, your brain doesn't have as many clues to perceive what's reality, and so they tend to look more believably 3D with one eye. And this is probably a poor example to introduce that concept with. Pat and I were about to make a map of the Colorado Rocky Mountains after that Sierra Nevada map. And we were really excited about it. You know, I recognized a few mistakes I'd made on the Sierra Nevada map and thought I could, you know, do a way better job. And Pat did all of his GIS scientific work and gave me files, and I was starting to make it, and I got to thinking, you know, I've been making maps for 20 years or 25 years or something like that, and I'm still struggling. You know, I'm not really making a living at this. My maps have been critically acclaimed, and I had a lot of people who were loyal to my work and supported my work, but I wasn't making what anybody in our part of the world would consider a living. And so I thought, I need to make a map that's got a bigger market. You know, most products that you might make, you know, you can sell them just about anywhere, but a map, you know, it just has limited geography. So I found a bigger chunk of geography to make a map. So I decided to make a map of the United States, and sort of ironically, it's my most artistically applied map. I knew that if this map was going to be accepted into popular culture in one way or another, that I had to work out all the bugs. No, nothing clunky, nothing funky, nothing hard to understand. It had to be as polished as a Hollywood movie or you know, a magazine or whatever else that we do. The things that are in popular culture, art in popular culture is very well done, with very few exceptions. And so I knew I had to rise to that level of presentation with this map. And as Bill Loy said, Bill Loy said a lot of really cool things. One of the things he said is everybody needs an editor. And that's Peter Eberhardt, the guy that introduced me, was the geographic editor of this map. Peter would come out to the map house out north of Harrisburg, out in the grass seed fields, about once a week. We'd spend like an entire afternoon talking geography, you know, looking at the map and trying to decide where to go with it and stuff like that. So he was influential in guiding me down the road of geography that turned this into the essential geography of the USA. There was also an artistic editor that I had discussions with daily about the artistry of it, trying to weed out problems. Somebody that had a lot of talent in visual arts, both graphic and fine arts. This is a detail from the Essential Geography. Everybody knows where this is. And there's another one of those. Oh, goodness. So, since I've done that, published the Essential Geography map, I have learned something very important about being an artist. I learned that it takes as much time or more to get your art out in the world as it does to create your art. And so this map, my map of the United States, was published in 2010, late in the year. This is now 2015, and I haven't really done a heck of a lot other than market that map in all this time. But I have done some more things. I've started to look through my work, all this work that I've had accumulated for 30 years, looking for images that would reproduce well as art. And I've learned a lot about that. You know, it's not as obvious as I thought. Hey, this is a good one to check out, that one eye thing. Is there anybody who doesn't get that? Looking at it with one eye? It doesn't see 3D here, that deep valley there? Well, anyway, it fascinates me, especially if you're moving when you're looking at it. Holy cow. Another detail of it, this image is on canvas and is out on a limb gallery where I have a lot of my art. And then, you know, for presentations, I just went looking for cool things. And I think this is beautiful. If you saw something like this in a museum of modern art or something, you think, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. I would. And then Michigan has the most popular shape of any state in the United States. I did all these state vignettes. You know, there's one of Oregon back there. Here's a huge one of Oregon here that I did very recently. I mean, the ink is practically still wet on this thing. I just picked it up a few days ago. But anyway, so I did all 50 states basically and put them on my website. And I couldn't keep Michigan in stock because, you know, it looks pretty cool.
That's nice. And
then, you know, just the power of looking at a place like this from a new cropping or something. Just, I think Florida looks like a big oak tree or something. So that's why I like this one too. I call this View of the Neighborhood 2. You know, this is our neighborhood, folks. You know, looking up the valley, you can see Seattle up there, Portland, and all that. You know, Umpqua River to Puget Sound. You know, this is it. You can see what's around us. The Wallowa Mountains from the north. Oh, close your eyes. Close one eye. Oh, so I did that Missoula floods map. I did this tornado map. I basically did this in that Missoula floods map for Facebook posts. For, I don't know, a couple of years, I had this post on my Essential Geography Facebook page that I call Rediscover the USA. And I was doing maps like this, and it was a lot of fun. It gave me an appreciation for doing thematic cartography.
What year was your tornado map?
What year did I do that?
Yeah.
2014.
Oh, wow.
So, but this is like from data collected over 100 years.
Wow.
So, you know, this is just averages. So you can see where you might want to live or might not.
Dark is scary, huh?
Dark is frightening, yeah. This is Tornado Alley, I guess. You know, but look at, I mean, clear up into here, into Massachusetts. And I heard from, when I put this on my Facebook page, I heard from somebody living up there, and they said, yeah, that's right. You know, we get way more tornadoes. Anybody guess what that is? Huh?
It's a delta. It's a floodplain.
Mississippi River. Somebody's, you said Mississippi? Yeah. I call this Mississippi Krummholz. Krummholz is the term that geographers give to alpine trees that are all distorted by the wind and ice and stuff like that. And I just wanted to see what the Mississippi River would look like done as a bent up tree. And then, so I did this, and then a friend of mine who's a watercolorist had a bunch of backgrounds and sent some to me, and I scanned them and found one that I thought looked kind of like storm clouds behind it. So anyway, this one, I'm probably going to put this on my website, but it's not there yet. And I've done a couple of maps that are along the lines of the Essential Geography map. This is Yosemite, obviously, and I thought it turned out pretty good. But the Yosemite Conservancy, who they sell my Sierra Nevada map, they didn't want to sell it. It's like, oh. And this is the basic geography. But anyway, I have a nice online business with these things. And the Chesapeake Bay watershed, this I consider my very best work that I've ever done. And I've got a framed copy in the back to look at, you know, on your way out if you want to just see what I think is my best work. My maps, they all get printed just inside the Beltway, right? Just to the, I don't know, maybe 5 miles east of the Capitol building. Hey, so this is a photo of the gallery that I'm in. Right now, my stuff is hanging on this wall.